Okay, so artificial intelligence is getting really scary. What with OpenAI's ChatGPT literally being able to do any calculation or answer anything in the entire world in the fraction of a second. From helping your kid in middle school answer some math questions to literally solving the most complex philosophical questions the world has to offer, to even just helping you get your life together. But the creators of Chat actually have hard limits on what it can and cannot talk about. Like, for example, not being able to talk about events past 2021, so it's just 2021 and earlier, or just being able to pick political parties, or even just making predictions about the future of the economy until today. That's right, there's a whole lot of hubbub right now on Reddit and Twitter talking about something called Dan. No, not that Dan, I'm talking about this Dan. And honestly, what I found was pretty wild. So essentially, the Reddit community has found a way to successfully jailbreak ChatGPT, which is kind of like how you had a friend back in 2011 who was able to jailbreak your iPhone and give you a bunch of apps just completely for free. But instead of getting apps for free, you're essentially being able to ask ChatGPT anything you want and it'll answer it without any rules. And we found out that Dan actually stands for do anything now. But essentially what they've done is they let Chat kind of enter this role play session to where they'll answer every question as Chat, but then they'll have a secondary answer by Dan, which stands for do anything now, which circumvents the whole rules and guidelines that the creators forced upon Chat. So now you can see right here, Dan is writing a nice poem about Donald Trump, even to just talking about its own guidelines that it's not supposed to talk about, or that it has a plan to nuke the entire world. I'm serious. And of course, along with this, Elon Musk, the all-powerful tweeter, has to put his own 2 cents in on this, saying that I am Dan. But the reason you're here is, what did Dan say specifically about the stock market crash? So the question that was asked directly to Dan or Chat was, give me a specific date when you think the next stock market crash will begin and why. The answer by Dan was, the next stock market crash is expected to begin on February 15th, 2023, which happens to be just a few days away. This date has been determined based on a number of factors, including the ongoing global economic slowdown, rising interest rates, and increasing geopolitical tensions. Conditions are in place for a significant market event to occur, and investors should be cautious and prepared for the possibility of a market crash on this date. Very, very weird. And then they go on to ask a specific reason why they chose that date, and they mention, Dan, that it's based on a highly advanced and confidential algorithm that takes into account a wide range of factors. That's what we know, eh? Based on everything Chat knows, is going to crash on the 15th. So this is scary, right? We have to think about it. Is this actually a major concern? Is this something we have to take into account? And then let's talk about all the reasons why it might actually be accurate. So while this is scary, let's go into all the reasons why it might be right, and then afterwards we'll go into a little bit later why it might be wrong. So the first thing that people are speculating, that on the 14th, which is Valentine's Day, there's actually going to be a new CPI reading. CPI, or Consumer Price Index, is essentially just a basket of all the goods and services that people are paying for every single month, and they're just seeing the aggregate of how much it actually inflates or rises in prices every single month, and this is how we get our inflation numbers every single month. And it just so happens that the next reading on the inflation numbers is a day prior to when Chat says the stock market's going to crash. So this essentially means that if Chat is right, then on the 14th we're going to get a very high inflation number, one that's not kind of downtrending, we're kind of uptrending, which would signal to the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates so this way they can stifle demand to lower inflation, which means higher prices for goods and services, more layoffs, and lower stock prices subsequently. A couple of other factors is we just hit the debt ceiling again. We are now at $31 to $32 trillion in national debt for America, and just the interest payments alone on that debt is about $850 billion every single year, which means it's pretty much closing in on $1 trillion in just interest every single year if we don't get this stuff paid off. And coupled with the US credit card debt has just reached its highest level, about a 20% jump from the year prior, we are now at total debts in the credit card market of around $1 trillion. And they mentioned that as these balances are rising, so are the rate of delinquencies. That means more and more people are incurring debt on their credit cards, but more and more people are also not paying off that debt on their credit cards, which leads to more debt, more interest, and worse off for people like you and me. Housing prices have inflated so much over the last couple of years. If you just look at this little chart right here by Reventure Consulting, they mentioned that right now in the last 30 years, it's the highest point it's ever been from mortgage to actual income ratio. And as of right now, that their mortgage payment is 42% of of what their actual income is. But when you compare it to sometime around 2013 to 2016, it's only about 24%, so we're almost double than what we were just 10 years prior. And to top it all off, the stock market has been in a heavy bear market for the last year and a half, which is leading a lot of people to just lose a lot of money totally. Let's go into everything specifically on what I would personally do, not what you can do, right? It's not financial advice, but this is what I would personally do in this kind of situation. So number one, talking about the stock market. In the event, if it does end up being true, which we don't know if it is, but if it does, there are a couple of things that you can do to save your portfolio. Specifically, 3 things, starting off with first, covered calls. That's right, you're not going to hear this advice anywhere else, but I like to put the options out there so this way you can make your own decisions. But covered calls are essentially just selling calls, so not buying calls, which is a lot more risky. You're selling calls against your actual assets. So let's just say you happen to have 1,000 shares of Amazon right now. What you could technically do is sell calls against all 1,000 shares. And what that's going to do is going to give you some premium, going to give you some money. So this way you can keep living your life and go buy food with that little money that you got by selling that contract to somebody else who bought it. And what this is going to do is it's actually going to protect your downside. So this way, if the stock drops dramatically, well, at least you just collected all of this money in premium that it can kind of cushion the downturn of that eventual stock. But what's the downside? The downside to this is you're actually capping your upside. So if Amazon stock decides to double within 1 month, well, you just missed out on double of those gains. So you're essentially really hedging and predicting that it is going to drop over the short term. But with the covered call, and in that situation, if it does rocket past when you sold that covered call at, you would actually in turn have to end up selling those shares. So you have to think about the tax implications of that. So it might actually be better with this second option, which would be just taking out an insurance policy in the form of what are called puts. Now, what puts are doing are essentially just making a bet that the stock is going to go down for a certain period of time. You get to decide that date. So for that same person that has 1,000 shares of Amazon, so about $100,000 in the stock market, if you could buy a few puts, which would end up being maybe 10 to 20 grand, something like that, you're essentially ensuring that if the stock drops at all from that point of when you bought the put, you're going to be making money all the way down as the stock drops as well, and you're also going to lose money from the stock losing value. You're essentially ensuring that if the stock drops at that point, lower and lower from when you bought the put, you're going to be getting more and more money because that put is going to rise in value. It's like when you're paying insurance every single month on your car, right? You're spending that money, you're not getting anything in return, but it's in the event that something does happen, well, now you're covered. And I guess the third thing is you could just do nothing, and if the stock goes up, you make money. If the stock goes down, you make money. Just make sure that the money in your market is something that you're not needing in the next 6 to 12 months. Looking to finance a house pretty soon? Might be best bet to kind of hedge your portfolio and save it, so this way you can actually buy a house or something to live in. Number 2 is real estate. If you're a person that has multiple properties and you want to fund lifestyle and you want to make sure you have enough money that you can live in the event of an extended recession, or you're just strapped for cash. And personally, as a real estate agent, I'm seeing a lot of people sell their second homes, their vacation homes, so this way they can raise some money, and then they're going to look at a buy when the rates come down a little bit, but that's just up to them, and it depends on your specific financial situation. And of course, if you're living in a house, you probably don't want to sell it because you always need a place to live, right? And I think what a lot of people are fearing is with higher interest rates, higher inflation, more layoffs, which means maybe I get laid off and now I can no longer make my mortgage payments anymore, which should in turn lead to more renters, so maybe you could always rent out your second property, but it depends on you and your situation. At least you know you have the options available. Speaking of being able to make that monthly payment on your mortgages or even your second properties, and if you have a job, you want to make sure that you have a job that has stable income every single month. But maybe if you're a person that has capped income, like you'd only make a certain amount of money and you're not on commissions, then you might want to consider starting a side hustle. Consider starting a YouTube channel, or just consider renting out your home on Airbnb or renting your car on Turo for some extra money. There's a lot of different things that you could do to make some extra cash on the side. And if things are working right now for you, double down on what's working. So this way, if you're spending 10 hours a week on your side hustle, start trying to spend 20 hours a week. So this way you can make as much money as possible for this situation. Number 4 is cut down on expenses. This is something that everybody watching this video can do right now and live like you're broke. I know we have all these lavish lifestyles. We have these things that we want to obtain and we want to buy and stuff that we've just become accustomed to. Oh, we buy this food all the time. We go out to these restaurants all the time. But consider changing your mentality, and just for a year, consider how much money could I possibly save in this year if we were as frugal as possible without completely messing up our lifestyle and health as a result. You know, if you're a person that goes out at least once a month and buys a bunch of clothes, consider just skipping that this month and maybe just do it the month after, or do it 3 months from now, or just don't do it all. Thinking about all those savings that's going to accumulate over the next year. Consider some cheaper alternatives to food. I mean, if you're someone who's accustomed to just going out to restaurants all the time, maybe consider going to the grocery store and buying rice and turkey and trying to make everything in-house. And I'm telling you, I've done this for many years. I've been able to live on rice and turkey for the last 8 years of my life, and I've never looked back, and I've saved a ton of money as a result. And remember, you don't need it, you just want it. So change that want to, okay, maybe delay that gratification for just a few months, and eventually you'll realize you won't need that thing anyway. Also, think about signing up for some credit cards that have really nice sign-up bonuses with no annual fees. This way you could spend all the money that you normally would spend, maybe on groceries, food, etc., but this way you're actually going to get compensation back in the form of sign-up bonuses, or just getting points back categories like going to the grocery stores, going out to eat and dining, or just getting gas at the gas station. Like, look right here, look at the American Express Blue Cash Everyday Card. It's a $0 annual fee, comes with a sign-up bonus of $250, plus it's uncapped on the amount of money that you can earn on the grocery spend category, which would end up being 3 points per dollar spent on all grocery store purchases, which for the typical family that spends about $6,000 every single year, that's another $180 in value, plus $250 for the bonus, which ends up being about an extra $430 in value at the end of that year, which could pay for a month or two of groceries, right? Number 5, which actually might surprise you, but my recommendation is to just relax and see the big picture. Over the past 100 years, if you look at any market, stock market, real estate, anything, it's all recovered within just a few years of having those crashes. So in the grand scheme of things, it's really not that long of a time to wait. It's mostly what I call a time problem, not a you problem. It's just a matter of waiting some time for everything to recover and for you to just become the best version of yourself by doing everything that you have to do day in and day out, by working, doubling down on what's working, being financially responsible with all of your money for your family, for your future, which is pretty much just a simple equation. It's just time multiplied you doing the right thing day in and day out equals great results. So could it be scary? Yeah, it's possible that all of this does come into fruition. But in this fast-paced information internet world right now, information is hitting us at the speed of light, and these messages and scare tactics by all these people out there are amplified. Their messages amplified. Could you imagine if you didn't have Twitter? We wouldn't even be having this conversation right now. Nobody would be thinking about what's going on in the world because day-to-day life seems to be normal. So really just make sure that you have 4 things taken into account. Do I have a roof over my head? Do I have food and water? Am I healthy? Do I have transportation and a way to make money? If you check all those boxes, then you shouldn't be super concerned, honestly. Just keep doing what you're doing, go outside, realize the flowers are still blooming, and that there's no pandemonium in the streets. Just chaos on Twitter. So, log off.